Hey, what's up, everyone? Sam here from Wall Street Mastermind. I'm back here today with another client interview for you guys. Today, we are with our client Zach, and Zach has been working with us since. Geez, let me take a look. How long have we been working together? I actually don't know off the top of my head. It's been a while though. We started working together back in April, right? So it's been just over half a year, basically. Wow, time flies. And it's been quite the journey for Zach. And Zach recently finished up his recruiting process and was able to get a very successful outcome. So just wanted to get him to come on here and talk to you guys a little bit about his experience and see if he can share any advice on the process with you guys. So Zach, thanks for taking the time to do this on a Saturday.
Yeah, happy to be here.
Awesome, man. So, if you don't mind, just by starting with a little bit of introduction about yourself, I always like to give the listeners um, just a sense of kind of like what type of candidate you are, at least on paper, right? Like, like what school do you go to? Like, what kind of experience do you have? Like your GPA, whatever you want to tell people, just so that they know kind of like they can level set on like what the baseline is, right? Because a lot of times you're like, oh yeah, that sounds like me. It's a similar situation as me, and that's pretty helpful for them. So, do you mind starting with that?
Yeah, sure. So my name's Zach. I'd say I go to a semi-target. I have a pretty high grade point. Prior to joining Wall Street Mastermind, I've done a few internships within financial services, really ranging from like wealth management to mortgage banking and fixed income. So, a variety of different internships. And I knew sort of the more I became interested, like within finance, investment banking was something that I thought I'd be interested in. Um, and yeah, that's sort of what, at like a higher level, what prompted me to be interested in the field in particular.
Got it. Okay, so you go to semi target. So banks do recruit from your school, right?
Yeah,
Uh, and you had a pretty high GPA. I would say like probably like 3.7 or above, right?
yeah,
And so that's not a problem. You have plenty of, unlike a lot of my clients, you actually had a good amount of finance experience on your resume, right? You had done what, like 3 or 4 finance internships already by the time you started.
yeah.
Okay, so you're like a strong candidate on paper, sounds like. And so, what originally brought you to Wall Street Mastermind? Like, how did you find this?
So actually, I have a friend named Bradley who's also a part of the Wall Street Mastermind program, and I can go and again sort of what prompted me to apply to the program, but Bradley sort of told me about it. And by the time I started recruiting, which was about really 6 months ago, I know Bradley had already finished
Mm.
because he joined the program like before I did, and the banks recruit really early.
Yeah.
So like once I saw the level of success and the sophistication that he was having within his interviews, and then seeing where I was at, where I wasn't really having too much success, despite what I thought was me being a really strong candidate. That's sort of what prompted me to reach out to Wall Street Mastermind just to see where things were going wrong and where I could be improving.
Got it. Yeah. So, I mean, for those of you who are regular listeners, you guys have probably seen the other client interview that I did with Bradley, where he talks about his experience. And so, for those of you who haven't listened to that one, basically, Bradley is a total rock star, right? He got like every single interview he applied for, and he got like every single offer, basically. So that's kind of what Zach is referring to here. And so you're kind of alluding to this, but I agree. I think that like on paper you're just as good, if not a better candidate than Bradley, right? So like what was it that you felt like was kind of giving you trouble back then, or why weren't you having the type of success that you were hoping for?
It was really like I'd say it really was sort of my ignorance about knowing the entire field in general and sort of knowing how it worked. Like in terms of how I thought investment banking recruiting would work, I thought I would just like apply online through like the application portal and then like someone in HR might read my resume and then I'd get interviews because I thought I was a strong candidate. And I had applied, I think back in April, like a lot of banks were open back then. I think I'd applied to yeah, a few bulge brackets, and some other firms, and I just like wasn't really getting any interviews, and I was just thinking like, what is going on? Like, why is this not working? I think I'm a strong candidate, and then I'd say probably one of the biggest things then that by joining Wall Street Mastermind that I had learned that I would have been like completely oblivious to was just the concept of networking and reaching out to people. And I think like had I not then joined this program, I could have seen myself continually for like the following months, just like applying online, not really knowing why things weren't going well. And I probably wouldn't have been successful at all.
Got it. Okay. So you thought that since you were already pretty strong on paper, you had a good GPA, you'd done all these internships, that you could probably just get by with just submitting your application and then like all the interviews would come flooding in basically. And then,
Yeah, pretty much.
and then you started applying to, did you apply to like pretty much all the bulge bracket and all the elite boutique banks, or how many banks did you apply to?
I'd really say like I applied to everything, like anywhere that was a posting for investment banking, I applied to it. So yeah, that was all the banks.
So probably by the time you had come to Wall Street Mastermind, you probably submit applications for what, at least like 20 banks, maybe. It's not.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I'd say probably around 20 banks.
Okay. And you got no interviews, or did you get at least some
I
of them?
got I got one interview through my school at a company that came to recruit here. Um, and then I got one other interview. That was it. So about 2 out of 20.
Wow. Okay. Okay. And so you had those two interviews, probably just based on the strength of your resume, although you were expecting a lot more than that.
Yeah,
And then at the same time, you're looking at Bradley, and this guy's getting like every single interview, and you're just like, what the heck is going on, basically.
exactly. Yeah.
All right. So then, um, how did those two interviews go? Because you had those two interviews prior to working with us as well, right?
Yeah, so those were my first interviews then, and like I would say what's really funny is that like in retrospect, I remember getting off the phone with one of my interviews. I thought it had went really well. It was really all behavioral. And I like got off the phone thinking like that went well, and then like that was on a Friday. Then that following Monday, I got like a straight up like rejection um from that company. I was just like confused, like what did I say? What did I do wrong? And I'm thinking like then that sort I can get into this more about like with the actual program, but I didn't really know like how you would craft behavioral answers. Like I had known, for example, like what is like tell me about a time when like when you can make up some story or talk about some past experience. But even the idea of having like a pitch and like a direct reason for wanting to work at whatever company it is you're talking to is something I was kind of oblivious to. I just thought I'd be able to like get on the phone and say, "Yeah, my name's Zach. I've interned here, here, and now I want to intern here." And like that's not at all how it's done.
Got it. Got it. Okay. So you obviously had prepared for the behavioral interviews and probably for the technical interviews as well, I'm guessing, right? Uh,
Yeah,
with the behavioral interview, was tricky for you and for a lot of other people, quite frankly, is that uh, usually people feel pretty good about their behavioral answers, right? Because typically people think that, oh, like I'm just talking about myself. It's easy, right? Technicals, that's the hard part, right? The behaviorals are easy because I could talk about myself all day, right? That's what people usually think. But what you quickly realize is that sometimes what you think may be a great answer actually may not actually be a good answer, right? Or like you come out of the interview and you're like, oh yeah, I nailed that, right? Or I answered all of their questions flawlessly, and you feel good, and you don't get the job and you have no idea and they don't give you any feedback.
yeah.
Got it. Okay. So, um, how were you like preparing for these kind of things? Like so obviously you weren't doing any networking, but then like on the interview preparation side, like I'm sure you had um, a bunch of resources that you were using prior to Wall Street Mastermind, right? Like were you using like interview guides or financial modeling courses, or like which ones? Like what were you doing?
Yeah, so I bought I did have a few technical guides. I bought one on iBooks. I think it's called The Technical Guide to Investment Banking. That's a really good one. And then the Investment Banking Workbook by Joshua Rosenbaum.
Oh,
Those are really just the two resources I was using.
okay. And so those are both more focused on the technical side of things, right?
Yeah, really, only technical. Really.
And then like, what were you using to prep for the behaviorals?
To be honest, um, like nothing. I was just thinking about like if they were to say like, tell me about a time when, maybe just going through some stories in my head that I thought um, might be things that, yeah, sorry, things that I could say,
Oh,
um, but nothing really too specific on the behaviorals.
got it. Did you have anything where, I don't know, you at least like had a list of questions that you knew you had to prepare for, or like how did you know like what kind of stories or what kind of examples you needed to run through?
Yeah, so I thought if they were to say uh, tell me about like a weakness of yours. One that I just thought through would be, okay, public speaking. That's not something that I'm particularly great at, but something that um yeah, I mean that's pretty much like what I would just have said if they were to ask me like, tell me about one of your weaknesses, which is a pretty common behavioral question. And I definitely, even though that's not necessarily it's a fine thing to say. It's just like your delivery is also absolutely imperative. So to be like quite frank, I would say I wasn't really doing anything preparation wise, except maybe just doing some like thinking about things they might ask, but really nothing specific.
Okay, so actually, then it sounds like you're actually, at least on the behavioral side of things, especially, your preparation process was kind of, you're being kind of haphazard about it. Like, there's no actual concrete like game plan or strategy. You were just kind of, I don't know, going going with the flow and winging it. Like, oh, maybe I'll think about this question, maybe I'll think about that question, but it wasn't like structured in any way.
Yeah, really. Yeah, nah.
And since it's not like you have a ton of interview experience with us making interviews, and so I'm guessing it's not like you already knew like, oh, these are the type of questions they were going to ask, right? Like, did you ever find yourself getting caught off guard or getting asked questions during the interviews that maybe you hadn't thought of, and you had to like make something up on the spot?
Yeah, absolutely. I actually, in one of those first two interviews that I had, I remember one question they had asked me was like, think about something that people who don't like you so much might say about you. I think I just said something that like made absolutely no sense. But like thinking then about what maybe some of the underlying tones of that question were like some of your, that would have been a fine question to just talk about your weaknesses, but I was just kind of like oblivious to what the question was really trying to get you to think about.
Yeah,
Um, so there were absolutely like questions that were new to me that I was trying to think on the spot and come up on the spot with
yeah,
something that, like in the end, the delivery was just not good, and then that makes your confidence go sort of down. And then, yeah,
got it, got it. Yeah, because I remember I'm thinking back to our first conversation after Bradley kind of introduced us. And I think your biggest pain point at the time was just like you didn't know. I think you had already kind of struggled through the first couple of interviews that you just had, and then at that point you realize like, whoa, I really need a lot of help on the behavioral side because I don't know what I'm doing. Right.
yeah, absolutely.
Okay, got it. So then you come into the program. What what do you feel like was most helpful with the program? Like what were the things that we worked on together that you thought were kind of beneficial for the process or for your process?
It was really like, I wouldn't I would really say like it's all of the core fundamental things that I now know make for a good investment banking interview that I wouldn't have done prior to joining the program that were like most helpful to me. So definitely being able to make a pitch for yourself like, hi, my name's Zach. I'm interested in investment banking because of like ABC. And also just thinking through and working like on behavioral questions with you, than actually having somebody able to read my answers and read what I was going to say. Because I think if I didn't have like a mentor, if I weren't a part of this program, I would have just continued to say these behavioral questions that wouldn't have been edited or like looked at by somebody else, and I would have continued going to interviews not really knowing what I'm saying. Not that it was necessarily bad, but how it could have been strengthened to even make stronger answers. But then on top of that, all of the just like the other things you might not necessarily think about immediately with investment banking interviews, that I learned about, like always making really strong eye contact, really like projecting out your confidence in your voice. Those were other things that I think I was more aware of by joining the program. Then on top of that, just like the modules themselves were really helpful. Just understanding like how to send a cold email, how to network with people, just like everything you need to do also to just get your name out there. So I'd really say the behavioral component along with the modules were most beneficial to me.
Got it. Got it. Okay. So like on the networking side, like you said, prior to the program, you were doing zero networking. Is that right?
Yeah, zero networking. I'd say like the extent to my networking was like going to the info sessions for a few of the banks that came here on campus. And I thought that like I just put my name in their registration and think like, okay, like
Got it. Got it. Okay. And then after you joined the program, then and you learned everything you need to learn about networking and how to do it and whatever. Like by the end, like I mean, over the last 6 months or so, how like roughly how many networking conversations would you say you've had? You probably don't have the exact number, but like ballpark. Zach, can't hear you. Oh, sounds like we may have lost Zach for a second. Let me see if I can get him back online. All right, guys. Sorry about that. I got Zach back online. We got Wi-Fi problems, but Zach, I was just asking you before you dropped. So prior to the Wall Street Mastermind program, you did zero networking, right? Then after you came into the program, we taught you everything you needed to know about networking and how to do it and all that good stuff. Um, over the last 6 months or so, like how many networking conversations would you say you've had roughly, like ballpark?
I'd probably say maybe around I'd probably say around 160.
Wow. Okay. That's actual conversation, not like you reached out to 160 people, but like you talked to 160 people.
Yeah, the actual conversations.
Yeah. So you probably obviously have to reach out to a lot more than that then, because not everyone always responds, right? So, um, and would you say that having those conversations made a difference in terms of the number of interviews you got?
Absolutely. Yeah, I'd say absolutely. Like having being able to talk to someone, then they can introduce you to more people. And then like if you have somewhat of like a cohort of people within one thing, sort of knowing who you are, then they can notify HR, and that obviously helps you get an interview. So like reaching out to people is absolutely imperative if you even want to get interviews.
Yeah.
And then from there, like that just gets you the interview, and then it's your own personable basis to do well on those.
Yeah.
Uh, but yeah,
Because after that, I mean, given how strong of a candidate you were on paper, plus you now knew how to network effectively. Um, how many interviews would you say, or how many different interviews did you get after joining the Wall Street Mastermind program, roughly, if you know the number?
I really would say that in total I got probably around 40 to 50.
Wow. Okay. So you went from like 2 interviews before to then getting like 40 or 50 interviews after, which is just like huge difference, right?
Yeah,
Um, and I mean, geez, that must be a record. I mean, see, so that's what I always tell people is like, look, if you can, be solid on paper, and we worked on your application materials as well, right? We obviously you already had great experiences and whatnot, but it's just about tweaking your resume, refining it, and packaging everything together in a more effective way, right? Whether it's your resume or your LinkedIn profile. So we did that, right? We took care of that part, and then we took care of the networking part, and then pretty much after that, like getting the interview was no longer the problem for you, right? If anything, it was like, oh my God, I have so many interviews. I gotta go to all these interviews. And at some points you're probably feeling pretty burnt out, right?
Yeah, yeah. There were points where I was thinking like, what's going on here? Like all these interviews, like
Which is like a problem that other people would probably kill to have, right? But then then we had to tackle the next challenge, which is like, okay, now we fixed that part. You weren't getting interviews before, and now you are. Now we got to fix your interview skills so that you can actually turn these interviews into offers, right?
yeah,
And so, like, what would you say on the interview side of things? You talked a little bit about the behaviorals already, right? So the biggest thing there was just like, what do we do there? We just obviously first we had to teach you how to answer these questions, right?
yeah.
And that's just through the modules, like you mentioned, right? Um, what would you say is like for people out there who have a hard time imagining like what you could possibly learn about answering behavioral questions? Like, what would you say to them? Like, what kind of stuff are we teaching you?
I really say like even like one thing that I really learned after just also having listened to other people speak in the program is like a key trait of like being it's not even so much like what you're saying like as an answer so much as how you're saying it. So the idea of being able to like sound charismatic and sound really confident over the phone to project to the person on the other line that you're the best candidate and you're like very cool, calm, and collected was just something that by being a part of this program and also hearing the way other people answered potential behavioral interview questions or just the ways that they talked within like an interview, that was really something that you can't get outside of a program like this, just because I don't think there are really any resources out there that actually train you on a personable basis, like on a unique basis for making your own interview questions that are unique to you. So I'd say like being somewhat like magnetic over the phone is something that this program has actually like definitely taught me how to be.
Yeah. And what was it like? A lot of people they say, well, I can just practice my behavioral interviews with my friends, right? Or I could just practice my behavioral interviews with upperclassmen who have already gone through the process last year, right? Did you do anything like that at school, like practice with your friends or practice with upperclassmen?
Yeah, I had talked to Bradley, like, briefly, just sort of, like, running by, like, my pitch like, my, pitch prior to Wall Street Mastermind with him, and, he had mentioned, like, yeah, it's kind of short, like, you might wanna, like, lengthen that up, but I think he was just being nice, but I think, like, the difference is that since, like, you actually were an investment banker and you did interviews, um, like, you know the business probably better than anyone else, even who's had success within their interviews. So I think even though you could interview with like upperclassmen, like you wouldn't get as much out of it as you would with like an actual investment banking like professional.
Got it. So what you're touching on is just like the level of experience and knowledge is different
Yeah.
between what we offer here at Wall Street Mastermind versus say maybe someone who's just one small step ahead of you or has gone through the process once themselves. And I guess the other big difference I would say probably is just how invested this other person is going to be in your outcome, right?
Yeah.
Like typically, if you're practicing with a friend or whatever, upperclassmen, they might spend 30 minutes or they might spend an hour, you know, going back and forth to do a little bit and giving you a little bit of advice here and there. Maybe it's good advice, maybe it's not so good advice, who knows. But at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter to them that much if you get the job or not. So they're just like everybody's busy. No one's going to spend a ton of time helping you do something that they feel like you should probably do on your own, right?
Mhm.
Whereas with us, because you're our client, like our success is kind of tied to your success, right? And so we're very invested in getting you the outcome. And I mean, how much time would you say we spent together going through your behaviors in total, from like iterating on the answers to uh, teaching you stuff to practicing doing mock interviews? Like, I don't know, do you have an idea like how many hours?
I'd probably say I think yes, like on the phone, probably with all our meetings, probably amassed to around, I don't know, maybe a little over 10 hours.
Yeah, I think that sounds ballpark correct, right? And so to have like the level of detail and depth and feedback that you can get over like say 10 hours is obviously different. Like nobody else besides maybe like your parents or something is going to want to spend that much time with you, right? But then your parents don't know anything about investment
Yeah.
banking. So okay, so that's on the behavioral side, right? What about on the technical side? Like what was helpful for you on that side of things?
So I'd say like with the modules, they definitely do a very, very good job of like rehashing all like really all the questions you might see with an interview. I'd say the ones that trip people up the most are like the accounting questions across like three statements, like your income statement, cash flow statement, balance sheet. Because those outside of like the $10 depreciation question, those can get pretty tricky and pretty technical depending on what firm you're talking to. So what's really nice is that like within module 4, I know there are like a bunch of questions at the end of one of those module videos that's just straight up like accounting scenario questions. Now I have to say, like, even within like the Rosenbaum book, they don't really have any of those like accounting type questions. It's more just like the actual materials focus. So, like in terms of you actually studying. And I think rather than just trying to memorize material, you get much more out of your studying if you're actually working with practice problems. So I'd say on the technical side, what's nice about this program is that like it gives you literally like 30 different types of questions, whether it's like your DCF or your accounting or your LBOs, which are real questions that I've gotten in interviews that I knew exactly how to answer just because I'd seen them already before. So I'd say like the plethora of the problem sets you get within the modules is definitely something that was really beneficial.
Mm. Got it. Okay. So there's a lot more hands-on, a lot more interactive way to learn things. Like we're trying to teach you the actual concepts as opposed to like we never asked you to just straight up memorize anything, right?
Yeah.
Got it. Okay. Um, and so obviously it wasn't like, hey, now that you got interviews. Now you're starting to get a bunch of interviews, then everything is suddenly all good, and then like offers just coming in left and right. Like you still it's still a process, right? So like you said, you went through a bunch of interviews. There were a lot of rejections along the way. Um, how can you walk us through that process? Of like, how do you how do you stay motivated, and how do you like not because I would say you are super resilient and uh, persistent in your efforts. And so, like, how do you just like not let these rejections get to your head, and how do you just keep yourself moving forward constantly, like, and not give up on your goals? Like, do you have any advice for people? Because I think a lot of our listeners, like, they experience similar things where they get and I myself back when I was recruiting for investment banking, like a lot of people have heard my story, but I was recruiting in 2008, which is like the worst time ever to try to get into banking. I got rejected by probably over 20 banks before I got my first offer, right? And sometimes you start to have like self doubt, or like it starts to creep in, like, oh, am I actually going to be able to do this, or maybe I'm just not cut out for it. But like, how do you battle those kind of negative thoughts?
I'd say, I'd say, hmm, I feel like for me, since I had started, I'd say I started the process in late April, didn't really finish till a few months later. Um, I'd say like the nature of investment banking, since in reality, like only 1% of the people actually get the job, it seems natural that the people who are within that 1% have to be the strongest and the most resilient. Because if you're going into a career as like grueling and demanding as investment banking, you really, really do have to have a thick skin. So
Right.
I'd say the thing that motivated me was just knowing that hey, like within the whole process, what is kind of nice about investment banking is that there are so many banks out there that you can just like keep applying and applying and applying, and like knowing that the end wasn't really I wasn't really getting to like a point where there weren't any banks, just kept me motivated to just thinking like, come on, like I've already put this much time into it, like I have to see this to the end. But then also just knowing that like as I was saying before, by having a thick skin, like that's something that you're going to need in the business in general, so you can't let like rejections get you down. Otherwise I don't think you're like tough enough to be an investment banker in the first place. So it's really just like having like a disciplined and tough mind is like absolutely imperative to even going into the industry.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I mean, like I always tell people this is just like to your point about how low the acceptance rate is in investment banking. Um, the expectation should be that you will get more rejections than acceptances, right? For most people, anyway. Like there are like you know unicorns like Bradley who didn't get any rejection. But even Bradley, before he came to the program, he got rejected for all of his sophomore summer internships, right? But my point is just most people, like you'd be lucky to get one offer, but all you need is one offer, right? And before you get that one offer, a lot of the times, you're gonna have multiple rejections, sometimes dozens of rejections along the way. And you, to your point though, you really only lose when you quit, right?
Yeah.
And so you just can't quit. Obviously, just not quitting alone is not enough. Like you have to be able to identify, like each time you get rejected or whatever, you have to be able to identify um, why you failed or what was the mistake that you made or where did you trip up and what could you have done differently. And we had a lot of those discussions too, right? Like after one thing I thought you did really well was after every interview, if there was something that you kind of tripped up on during the interview, you would message me and then want to discuss it with me, and then we would figure out, what the right answer should have been and how you could do it differently next time, right? And I think that, and you tell me what you think, but I think that um, doing that over and over again is just like every time you're learning a little bit and you're gradually getting a little bit better than the last time, right? And even though seemingly on the surface you're it's a failure or whatever, but in reality every failure is just getting you one step closer to the ultimate success that you're looking for in the end, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I'd really say like watching me progress from where I was like so many months ago to where I am now, like actually being able to feel like it wasn't just like a gradual like me, I started and then things didn't stop until I got an offer. Like I could see I was getting like a much higher like turnover to super days as things were going on. And I knew like at some point with after the first few months that I'd started, like one of these super days has gotta kick in somewhere. So actually being able to have that experience and then being able to refine my questions after every interview and think through what they asked me, what I could have done better, was what made me like better at interviews, like having that actual experience. So I'd say like another thing that was just motivating me was knowing that I was making a lot of progress with my actual like interview capabilities.
Yep, yep. And that's, I mean, obviously that's not just important for investment banking recruiting, but that's really like a life skill that you need for the rest of your career, right? Because most people nowadays, it's not like they join a company and they stay there for the rest of their lives. Like you're gonna have to probably interview many more times in the future as well, right? Uh,
Yeah.
so awesome. So obviously you've grown a ton as you've gone through the program over the last 6 months. And so, um, what was ultimately kind of the outcome for you? Like, what kind of success did you eventually find? Can you kind of um, give people a sense of what ended up happening for you?
Yeah. So in the end, like yeah, I got three offers from three top banks within the middle market, being in New York and a few other, yeah, one in New York, one in Boston, and one in another place. So yeah, having had the ability to get like multiple offers was something that was nice because as you'd mentioned, like it's even harder to just get one, let alone multiple. But then even aside from that, like getting the offers was nice, but then toward the end of my recruiting, like as I was getting a lot more experience, I was also getting invited to a lot more super days, which was like a flag to me that I need to like see this through to the end because actually I'm getting better. So yeah, I was also getting a lot more super days toward the end as well.
Got it. So it was like it was just this progression, and if we're being completely honest, it probably took longer than you would have liked, which it always does for everybody, right? But at a minimum, as you were going along, you went from not really getting any interviews to now getting pretty much every single first round interview you wanted, to then initially not getting past the first round, to then like consistently getting past the first round to the super day, to then like not really getting past the super day, to then eventually ultimately ending up with 3 offers. And so it's just like a long drawn out process, which recruiting often is. But then, as they say, like nothing good comes easy, right? And
Yeah.
so by being persistent and being, like you said, having thick skin and not giving up, um, you were able to kind of come out on the other side with an outcome that you were very happy with, right? So out of those 3 banks, you ended up taking the one that's in New York. Is that where you're going to be?
Yeah, I'm going to New York.
Okay, got it. That's very exciting. How are you feeling about that?
I'm super excited. I mean, yeah, New York's like the capital city for doing finance within the United States. So, yeah, super excited for that opportunity.
Awesome, man. Well, look, obviously, I want to congratulate you again on the success. I'm super happy for you, especially just knowing how much work you put into this and how hard you had to grind. I mean, like you said, like going to 40 or 50 interviews. I mean, that's just, and not like an insane amount of work, but just time invested and the stamina that's required, and just the faith you had to have in yourself to keep going and not give up. I think all of those things are like I really really admire you for what you were able to accomplish and just how far you were able to come and how much you've grown during this time. So it was an absolute joy to be able to have a little part or play a little role in that. But obviously, uh, most of that is on you, and you deserve all the props in the world, right? So um, for everybody else, like all of you guys that are listening, I think Zach is a testament to the fact that if you are really determined enough to get into this industry, um, there's no reason why you shouldn't be able to do it, right? The problem is like for the vast majority of people, one, they give up too soon, right? Or they don't know how to deal with rejection in a positive way. They don't have the right mentality around that. And then secondly, um, sometimes like their ego gets in the way, and they don't know that they need to reach out for help, right? Or they think that they're already doing good enough, right? And they're not. There's no self-awareness. Whereas I think with Zach, like he was able. One thing that he did really well was he was able to very quickly identify what wasn't working for him, and he had no ego about it, and he reached out at the first at the earliest possible point, right? Pretty much as soon as he found out about the program. And so for the rest of you, if you are in a similar situation, right? Maybe you've been recruiting for a while on your own and you're not really seeing the success that you want to see, or you're not getting the interviews, or you don't know how to answer the interview questions, even though you have interviews, whatever it may be, um, we can absolutely help you with that, right? And so if you're interested in getting that type of help, I would start by scheduling a free strategy session with our team. And you can do that by going to www.wallstreetmastermind.com/apply. The street in the URL is abbreviated to ST, so it's wallstreetmastermind.com/apply. And what we'll do is, you pick a time that works for you. You hop on the phone with one of our team members, um, and we'll learn more about your situation and what it is that you feel like you need help with. And if we feel like we can help you, if and only if we feel like we can help you, and that we're a good fit to help you get the outcome that you want. Then we can discuss what it might look like to work together, right? Sometimes though we might not be able to help you, in which case we'll refer you out to another resource that we think would be better for your situation, or just give you some advice on what we think we would do if we were in your shoes. Okay, so either way, this conversation, like I said, is free, and a lot of people have even hopped on this call with us, talked to us, and just taken the advice that we've given them and implemented it themselves, and gotten very phenomenal outcomes that way as well, right? So you got nothing to lose. Highly encourage you guys to go and book this call, and hopefully we look forward to speaking with you guys in the near future. So that will be it for this interview. Zach, again, I want to thank you for being so generous with your time and doing this on a weekend. Huge congrats again. You deserve all the success that you have coming to you, and definitely don't be a stranger just because you're graduated from the program now. Definitely would love to keep in touch and just, be kept in the loop on how your summer goes and where you end up for full time and all that good stuff. All right.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, man. All right, guys. That'll be it for today. And thanks for tuning in. We'll be back again in the near future with another client interview for you guys. Okay. Talk to you guys.
Thank you.